Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the weekly installment of the Top 10. These are the hottest selling cards in Magic the Gathering this week from January 11th to the 18th of 2025. And we have a large array of cards from Duskmourn to Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of modern and standard going on in today's video, so stay tuned. We're gonna get started. I am your host, MTG Moxman, here for the weekly installment of the Top 10. Thanks again for swinging by the channel to catch a look at the hottest selling cards in Magic this week. A reminder before we start today's video that if you like what you see and you want to hang out with me every day, just like and subscribe to my channel. And of course, if you're shopping on TCG Player, don't be shy. Use my TCG Player affiliate link found in the description of the video. Number 10 this week is the Overlord of Baelmerk, and that's from Duskmourn, the House of Horrors. This card has an average price of $32 and a total sales volume of $70,000 this week. That's 2,209 sales. Some serious money, because this card is being played in Standard, it has homes in Commander, and it's even being played in Modern. So look at the price tag and look where things are going. Starting out in January, this thing's had some good tournament play. There's a lot of decks starting to show up with this thing, that it's enough so that we're seeing some price pressure and a supply demand on this card. Now, the Overlord, most people are casting it for that impending ability. It puts a time lapse. It gives you a counter time down to say where you're going to go. And that's because when this thing goes in, you start flipping cards into your graveyard and doing crazy things, it's going to let you get back your key cards. And that means, yeah, Valgoth is coming around. Now, our number 9 card this week is Sink into Stuper, and that's from Modern Horizons 3. Now, this card had 2,626 sales, which is 2626. Now, the total sales volume is $27,047. But I want you guys to really pay attention to how much this card has been climbing in the last few months. This thing is found in Modern all over the place, and when you see the price tag going from like $1 or $2, slowly creep into that $5, and we talked about this card month over month about where it was going in Modern and what players were doing with this card. Sink into Stuper, with its multiple effects, is offering players a lot of card advantage. It's offering a lot of choice when you get things going, and being able to have 4 of these in your deck means I can make choices to make sure I'm getting ahead, and if I don't need it, I've got land when I need to get going. I love the card, guys. It is amazing to see what you can do with crazy stuff like this. So, Sink into Stuper, $10 uncommon, insane. Now, for our next card, it's Hera Parent from Foundations. Yes, the rabbits are back. Now, 2,889 sales. That's $13,000 plus of total sales volume. And this common is not really common, is it? It's not easily found, and it seems to be on its own track of printing, because these are not found readily available as much as you'd think for a common, of course. And that's jacking this price up. Plus, let's face it, it does have good standard play, and a lot of players are using it. I myself have several decks using this card right now, and I love every minute of it. When the rabbits get off there with Patchwork Banner and all kinds of other crazy things that pump these guys up, oh my god, I love it, guys. It's just amazing to see this card go, and the price tag is one of those things you go, it's a common for $5. A lot of players have a hard time swallowing the carrot on this one, but also knowing you want to have 20 or 30 of these things and spending all that money, it just seems insane. But guess what? I've seen this deck in real life. It's kind of scary. Now let's go on to our next card. Pest Control. That's right. We're not talking about rat traps in the house. Outlaws of Thunder Junction, the big score. This thing here is now at 3,412 sales this week. I saw it going on a tear a little bit earlier this week. I came back to track down the sales, put some calls in, and we're at $15,000 of total sales volume. Average price of $4.65. And of course, it's easy to understand why. There are so many token decks going on right now that this thing's a hard card not to have around if you're playing with the color wheel that permits it. Now, the $4.65, it's actually kind of gone down. It's just starting to curve up again, and that's the prevalence we're seeing of the token rise right now. Now, that token rise is something Wizards has been focusing on, and we have a lot of gameplay involving creating tokens of one sort or another. But Pest Control really does solve the problem for players. Destroy all non-land permanents with mana value of 1 or less, which is every single token. Plus, if you don't need it, you can cycle to thin things out, and that's something you shouldn't ignore either. I can understand why players are buying this card this week. Now, for our next card, we're jumping over to Bloomborough. As you can see, guys, we got a wider range of cards right now. Now, Bloomborough has something going on we got to talk about. 3,506 sales, $19,800 of sales action, $5.65. It still has lost money this month, but the sales are indicating an increased volume. And we can tell this by looking at past dated sales on several player formats, sales listings disappearing, as well as private sales in Facebook groups and stores, of course. When we add all these sales up and we see where things are going, you can actually expect this price to start turning around until it climbs over just the $6 mark again. I don't see it going past that because of the Bloomborough tins, but the supply chain on this card is just, it's not good enough. And when players are buying playsets of 4, there's not enough to go around. Our next card is from Foundations, and this is Bolt Wave. Now, it, of course, has a homing commander. It's played in standard in some kind of burn decks of various types. I'm using it right now with Slick Shot, and it does very well because this kind of card is a single casting cost that does the 3 damage, pumps up the Slick Shot, helps things out. Any creature with prowess benefits from cards like this with low casting costs, not something to ignore. And the fact it gets played in Commander, it just means there's multiple uses that are keeping the price higher than normal. I would have expected this card to slip below the $2 mark, but I should have known better when I saw how players were using it and how everyone wants to play set of 4 and in some cases 8. So that kind of supply chain just doesn't exist, which is forcing the price higher on the sales side of things. It means the guys selling the card are in control and the buyers are at the mercy of who wants to sell it and for how much. Bolt Wave is everywhere, a great card to be played with. Now our next card, though, we're jumping over again to Modern Horizons 3. This is Urza's Cave. $3.43, still on an upward trajectory. 3,591 sales, which is $12,317.13. Now, a lot of players got this card at the $2 level. A lot of people bought it at the $10 level. And now we have players starting to buy it as it starts climbing. I don't know if it's going to reach $5 again, but I do know that even at $5, it's probably a good card to get control of and at least have a play set of 4. Not only if you're a modern player, but for your commander decks. Just because of how often you can go back to get things, you can't ignore a card like Urza's Cave or even Echoing Deep from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. These are 2 cards I would keep an eye on. Now, I myself have a couple of play sets of this card. I knew it was going to go back up and recover, and I think I paid $4 for mine. But I bought ones for the patrons, and those were only $2 and change. So we got a good deal on that one. Let's go ahead and take a look at our next card. We're jumping over here to the Troll of Keswick Dome. I can't believe we have a Lord of the Rings card jumping on. This thing's fallen below the dollar mark at 75 cents, but there was a massive surge of sales. 3,688 sales, and it was across several online places as well as local stores. One local store sold 80 copies, and I thought it was kind of interesting. So I looked at a couple of others, and you see 40 copies, 50 copies being sold. A lot is losing here, okay? When these things are being taken off the shelves and being lost into somebody's collection, if somebody's building a position, it's going to eventually force the price back up if players find a use for it. The fact we see Modern still adapting and still changing right now means a lot of these kinds of cards are being bought for purposes yet unknown. Players are buying them in case they need them or in case there's going to be a price spike later on. They're in a good position. And at this price point, I can see why. Now, jumping over here, we have Untimely Malfunction. This card has several uses. Now, I've seen this thing in Boros Burn. It's kind of a jack of all trades kind of card. It's a well-positioned to situationals with your opponents. Based on what your opponent does, it gives you different options. Those options are allowing players to do crazy stuff. 4,210 sales out of the blue, $13,000 plus, okay? But Untimely Malfunction, we talked about it before, at $3.21, and all these uncommons seem to be climbing to the $5 level. This is something we have not seen in really like a decade almost, when we have this many uncommons jumping up, and it really shows the value point that Wizards has put on these cards. Now, Untimely Malfunction, the destroying artifact, changing the target of spells that might be targeting your single creature, or of course, 1 or 2 target creatures can't be blocked. Clearing the way for your creatures to kill an opponent, amazing. Stopping one of your creatures from dying, if it's a single target spell, amazing. Destroying pesky artifacts, amazing. Now let's jump to the number 1 card, which is Nowhere to Run. 4,380 sales, $11,000 of sales action, and this card's actually falling in price. It's down to $2.52, but you can't ignore the fact this thing's an enchantment with flash, It gets a creature -3/-3, and it can blow things out of the water that are moderate power level. It's an amazing card. Now, the fact that it's falling below just shows that right now, supply and demand have met in the middle. Players are no longer putting pressure on the card, and we have an easement right now. And until we see Aether Drift come around, we don't know if there's more need for this card. But the creatures your opponents control can be the target of spells is something you don't want to miss out on. That hexproof ability means it's going to be used in things like Commander later on, but it also could be used even a year from now if some new crazy standard format has a lot of hexproof. Don't forget it. So here we are at the end of the video, and there's a couple of things I'd like to discuss with the players before we end off the video today. When you looked at the list of cards, did you notice how many uncommons are selling and at the level they're selling at and the price point as well? This is likely going to be a new trend that is going to hold true for all of 2025 because the uncommons coming out and the way they're being printed in track printing is making them more difficult to get. Being more difficult and being useful, well, that means they're going to have a higher value point. A card like the number 2 Untimely Malfunction this week, this card has been on the list before and it went off and now it's back again, but its utilitarian purpose across multiple formats guarantees a certain level of value. That value will be translated into Wizards of the Coast, reprinting it sooner rather than later, and within probably 2 years of it going out of print in Standard. They will bring it around to a premium product and allow players a chance to kind of fill out the deck because, as we know, with the money moving on as quick as we see it right now, this is one of those cards like Deadly Dispute from Dungeons & Dragons. They knew they had a hit. They knew it was big, but people had already moved on from D&D because it wasn't a great set. They shoved it into Battle for Baldur's Gate, but that didn't go well, so the price stayed high for quite a while. This is going to be that trend for a lot of the cards you see on the list this week that were uncommons and around the $3 to $4 level, which again is not the average we've seen traditionally in the last several years. But it is a trend that Wizards of the Coast is going to want to follow up on. There, enough of that? All right, let's move on to the next thing. Cards like Hera Parent. I don't see those cards holding long-term value, but it's interesting in the next 2 years, it's probably going to stay above the $3 mark for anybody who wants to play with it. And let's face it, rabbits are cute. They're cuddly. Who wants to get beat down by rabbits? Players like the chance of that. They like the idea that they can come around and get this stuff done. And then because it's a semi-expensive card for what it is, players who take the time to build it are going to be really proud of those rabbits, man. They're going to try and make those things work. But if you have a deck with 30, 40 rabbits in it, and you have hundreds of people building the deck, if not thousands in some cases, well, we're going to have a supply chain issue. Money's moved on. Nobody's opening new packs. And that's why the price will probably stay there. Now, the last one I want to talk about is the Overlord. Overlord of Baelmerk. When I see prices like this jump up from like a $10, $15 card, 30 and climbing. Yes, it's a great card. I have lost to this card dozens of times. I've seen it in everything from Commander to Modern to Standard. Its versatility can't be understated. The impending mechanic is amazing for a card like this. And if you build around getting crazy cards into your deck that are like non-avatar stuff, you are going to see a lot more decks bearing down on things like this. And we haven't even seen what the rest of this is kind of going to move into as the year progresses for Standard and Modern. We don't know what other saucy, spicy things Wizards is adding in because a set like Duskmourn is still new and the mechanics are new. So Wizards will have a plan for these things later in the year, if not next year. When they're getting closer to rotating out, they may offer us up some kind of cool synergy to end off that block in Standard. Keep this stuff in mind. It always comes around. But when I see a value that high, it could push all the way to $40, and that's something you need to be aware of. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for hanging out with me on the channel today. The overall sales are kind of incredible to look at. It shows the strength we're seeing right now in Standard, Modern, and of course, like I said, Commander's always hanging in there. It is always nipping and eating away at sales every single week. But with Commander, it's a much broader spectrum of cards, which is why we see so many. I mean, there's a couple of cards that didn't even get on the list. I know it's off topic, but Mystic Sanctuary, 1800 sales, and Sandstorm Salvage almost made it with 1920. Not enough sales to make the list, but really close, guys. There was a lot of cards that made it up. I had to count an extra like 20, 30 things out there when people sent me the info. So thanks again for hanging out. Thanks for being here on the channel. Shop smart, shop as smart. Drop some comments. We have some crazy sales going on, and I'll see you guys soon. Is there any cards you think may be a chance to boom up later? you made it this far in the video, drop a boomstick, mention the card you think is going to go up. I'll take a look at it and see if we can find some evaluation on it. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you soon. Here we are. We're at the end. You see these names? You see them flashing by the screen right now? Take a moment. Breathe it in. Because these are the people who support this channel. They're the ones who make sure this content happens every single day. Thanks again to my patrons. Thanks again to my YouTube membership members. It's because of you. We'll see you tomorrow. Welcome back to the Ramble Jamble. You've made it. You're here. And now we get to talk. Isn't it interesting that people said Standard is dead, but the card sales indicate Standard's alive? Modern's not very popular because it's too expensive, but the Modern sales tell me that people are playing Modern. And then, of course, Commander sales are right there with them. All right, so you have all these formats being played because the sales tell me that people must be playing them or they're doing something with the cards. Yeah, I'm sure there's all kinds of casual players in there too, but they're playing. Those sales aren't make-believe. That's money being spent. Tens of thousands of dollars. Okay. Now, we can't forget that this is just a grouping of players, right? This is one Beta Mox Sapphire. When you look at a vintage player, a player who's buying reserve list cards, old school stuff, it takes a lot less cards to make a lot more impact in the price range, depending on what you're buying. The fact that Wizards of the Coast continues to reprint these cards, it kills the value. It eats away the market and brings that price down. Then they come on to something new. We know this. It's like a revolving wheel, a water wheel that goes round and round. But what gets me is right now it seems to be this slightly shifting trend of the pinwheel, where they're not reprinting as fast, it appears. And they seem to be building up an entirely new cache of cards to tap into. All these cards we're seeing that they're not 50-cent uncommons. These last few sets have all had these 5, 6, 7 sink into Stupers I think I have it in a pile of cards here. I'm at the other property. And one of the piles over here. I think I just had it in the wrong pile. I'm like, that's an expensive card now. Like, that's hilarious, but it's great. It's great. Because it shows that Wizards of the Coast is learning and adapting to the player needs and desires for collectability. And maybe they'll manage it better this time. I know, got my hopes up. But I don't want you guys to ignore the fact that Wizards is adapting. They are recognizing what's going on. And this shift in the pricing, it's going to get a lot worse. They are going to make this stuff, the value is going to return. Keep an eye out. You're here at the end of the Ramble Jamble. The nutty things going on in my brain and the numbers I look at past sets and texts and sales listings, and everything just points that way to me. So we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right, but either way, you guys can comment about it now and say I'm a crazy man. All right, I'm going to go eat some. I'm not going to eat. It's late. What is it? It's 4:16 a.m. on Saturday. Well, I'm going to bed. I'll see you guys in the morning, probably